Royal priests. Do you have a favorite pastor or priest? Share a treasured memory of them with us. Hi, I'm Robin from the Lakes. It's Saturday, January 30th, and we are reading in Hebrews 7, a chapter that is filled with lots of information about a priest by the name of Melchizedek, who is an Old Testament priest. I invite you to read the entire chapter, but for today, we will be reflecting on verses 23 through 25. These verses remind us that Jesus is our forever priest. Starting at verse 23, it reads, "There are many priests under the old system, for death prevented them from remaining in office. But because Jesus lives forever, his priesthood lasts forever. Therefore, he is able once and forever to save those who come to God. Through him, he lives forever to intercede with God on their behalf." So what do you picture in your mind when you hear the word priest? What are they wearing? What are they doing? If you were raised in a Protestant culture like I was, your priest was actually called a pastor, and he or she may have worn a robe, something like the one that I'm wearing. You may have memories of them preaching from an altar, something like this one, or baptizing or offering communion to an elderly person in a nursing home. If you were raised in a Catholic tradition, you might picture the priest with a little bit more ornate robe, similar to this one. You may also have memories of them preaching, but also maybe sprinkling holy water or waving an incense burner or providing last rites to a dying individual. But if you lived in the Old Testament or time, like Melchizedek did, your priest was very different than the one we see today. Their robes were much more ornate than we have. Even the Catholic priests today, they are much more ornate. They are filled with jewels and bells, and they're very, very heavy. They look similar to this one. And unlike our priests today and our pastors, they spent their days not in preparing and getting ready for a sermon. They spent their days in the temple, making animal sacrifices and interceding for the people. You see, the main responsibility of the priests in Melchizedek's day was to intercede before God for the people by offering sacrifices that would atone for their sins. But the problem was, these priests were sinful too, and their sacrifices were temporary, which means they had to be repeated day after day after day. The writers of Hebrews remind us that Jesus is the great high priest that is far superior to the priests of the Old Testament, including Melchizedek. Jesus atoned for our sins not through daily animal sacrifices, but by sacrificing himself on the cross once and for all. His sacrifice rescued us from sin, death, and the power of the devil forever. And as our high priest, he intercedes with us all the time before God. That's good news, right? For sure. But that's not all. As believers in Jesus, we are priests too. The Apostle Peter says this, "You are chosen people. You are royal priests, a holy nation, God's own, very, very own possession. As a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." That's found in 1 Peter 2:9. Did you hear that? Did that register? We, as believers and followers of Jesus, are royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own people. We wear not the priestly garments of humans or pastors or priests like this. We wear the very robe of Jesus' our high priest righteousness that he gives us. And as God's very own priest, we get the privilege of representing God to the world. We have the responsibility of showing the world God's goodness and interceding for others with our prayers. So, question for you. As God's chosen priest, who do you know that needs to hear about the good news of Jesus? Who is God calling you to intercede for? I have a way that you can find that out. I invite you to consider becoming part of the Lake's Expedition Outward and joining a prayer triad to pray for the lost in our community. If you want to learn more about Expedition Outward, you can go to our website, thelakeswapaka.com, and find out how you, God's royal priest, can bring the kingdom to the lost.